Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we are going to be talking about the War Priest, a new build that I have for Cyrodiil. It's actually a really good build for being something that's both damage and support for gameplay in Cyrodiil itself. Now you can use this build in Battlegrounds. It's not as effective, but it is still a really good build even in Battlegrounds. And I would suggest that if you do play this in Battlegrounds, you have to understand its recovery is going to be a lot less. So, let's go ahead and take a look at it. We are an Argonian Templar with this. Argonian, I would say, is best for the build. Breton can play the build really well as well. You'll have a lot more spell resist than you do physical. And then I would say High Elf and then Dark Elf would be coming in after that. The reason I chose Argonian, though, is because of its passives. It's got some really good passives, like the 5% healing done, the 5% healing received. It really plays well into the build. It gives it good survivability through heals and some other stuff. But as you can see, we do have kind of a low max magicka. We do have a 31,000 max magicka with a 25k health. We do have a 12k stamina, and all that stuff plays really well into the build because you want to have a good amount of resources for survivability, for your magicka, and for your stamina, for like breaking free, dodge rolling, that kind of stuff. As you can see, our magic recovery is coming in at 1566. When we are fully buffed, though, our magic recovery is coming in at 1786. It can get higher. You don't really need like a 7k max or magic recovery or anything. This is perfect for the build. As you can see, we also have a 2,329 spell damage with a 46% spell crit. Our spell resist is coming in at 15k, physical resist is coming in at 10, and then our crit resist is coming in at 2,000. But when we are fully buffed on our resistances, we actually come in at 23 and 18. Actually, we get higher than that if you include this. So we actually go up to 1924. So we actually get really good resistances on this build. Not insane, but good enough to keep us going and keeping us alive in Battlegrounds or in Cyrodiil. Now, moving on, we are using the Ritual Stone, Mundus Stone, and the reason why is that 10% extra healing done. Anything you can do to boost your healing for you and your allies is going to be really good, especially in Cyrodiil. Moving on, we do have the ritual or a major prophecy because we have inner light on both bars, and then we are using Witch Mother's Potent Brew. This is going to give us magic recovery. It's going to give us max magicka and max health. All right, moving on to the gear. Starting with our food. Again, Witch Mother's Potent Brew. Now there is another food you can get that will give you health recovery and magic recovery. Both are really, both foods are really good. I like Witch Mother's because it's cheaper and it's easy to get a hold of. Now I am using spell power pots because I want to increase my spell damage and I want to get that major intellect, that magic recovery by 20%. That's going to play really well with us. Now we don't need to worry about major prophecy because we already have it. But that major sorcery that increases our spell damage by 20%, again, is going to be very helpful. Alright, going over the sets. We are running Earthgore. Earthgore is, I wouldn't say it's the best set you can use, but it is a really good set. Any monster set that does damage or healing and does magic damage of any kind and does any kind of heals for you or your groups, like Chokethorn's a really good one. You can use that in PvP, by the way, and it's very powerful. Bogdan's not so much. Sentinels is okay too. It's really good, especially at sieges. Sentinels is, but I like Earthgore because it does heal quite a bit. So as you can see, 38,250. Now for the first set we are using actual set, not monster set, is War Maidens. Now, why War Maidens, you might ask? Well, one, it increases our spell crit, our max magic, it gives us some spell damage, and then it adds 400 spell damage to your magic damage abilities. All damage abilities you use should have magic damage on it. Alright, moving on to the other set. Now this is an unusual one. Not a lot of people use this, but it is light speakers. And I love light speakers because, one, it increases our critical damage, our critical, our heal, our max magicka, our spell damage, and it increases our resto staff abilities by 450 spell damage. So that means any heals we use, any skill we use on the resto staff almost is boosted by 450 spell damage. It's crazy powerful, especially in Cyrodiil, because in Cyrodiil your heals are so weak anyways, because you get the battle spirit. This boosts your heals even more. So, and then on the enchants and the traits, we are running 3 well fitted on the big pieces. The reason why is so that we can dodge roll and we get reduced sprint. Now, because we are in light armor, we do get a reduced sprint cost, but we don't get a reduced dodge roll cost. This allows us to get a greater reduced dodge roll cost, and it saves us a lot of resources. So we're not burning through resources having to dodge roll, block, dodge, break free, all that. So that's why we want this here. Now on the smaller pieces, we are using in-pin. So we are using 4 in-pin here with 3 well fitted. And then onto the jewelry, we are running 2 spell damage and 1 magic recovery on an infused necklace. Now only the necklace needs to be infused. The other 2 I would leave arcane with the spell damage, because you want as high of max magicka you can have, and you want as high as possible the spell damage. So this is why we go with this route. Now onto the weapons, we are running 2 infused resto staves. The first staff, your main bar staff, I am running in an oblivion damage, because no offense, I know a lot of people complain about this, but I want to hurt people. So I'm going to use what I can. And oblivion damage seems to work the best for this build. You can use a magic damage enchant, which is really good. With the absorb magic enchant, you can use that. It'll give you magicka back whenever you deal a light attack or a heavy attack. On the back bar, we are using a weapon damage enchant. Again, we want to boost our magic damage as high as we can. We can get to about 3,500 with the buffs from the light speaker on our heals from the resto staff, and then on the war maiden we get another 400 on top of it. So we get about 32 to 3,500 spell damage in there. So it's really pretty good. Alright, and now before I get any further, people are going to ask why dual resto. Actually, I did a test. Resto staff actually does more damage with its light and heavy attacks than a lightning staff does. I know, sounds crazy, right? But it's true. With this setup, it's true. Unfortunately. Alright, so moving on now to the skills. Make sure you unlock all of your class passives for this build. It's very important you unlock all the class passives. Moving on to weapons, you're just using resto staff. Make sure you get all the resto staff passives. And then on to the armor. Light armor, get all the passives. Medium armor, the top 2, the bottom 1. And then the heavy armor, you want the top 3. Moving on to the world skills. Now, you can be a vampire with this if you want. I would suggest, if you are a vampire, to be a dark elf. It's not as effective. But you do end up with a little bit more stamina for dodge rolling, blocking, breaking free. And you do get better magicka to some degree. You get 9%. But you end up with about the same amount in stats. You end up with like 32k magicka, 25k health. But you do get the fire resistance for being a dark elf. Now, moving on to guild skills. Fighter's Guild, you don't really need anything. Mage's Guild, you can use Degeneration if you want. If you don't want to use a power pot and you want to use some other kind of potions, you can use Degeneration to give you the major sorcery. It's not necessary, but if you want it, it's there. Undaunted, you want the Undaunted passives. And with the Mage's Guild, I would suggest getting all the passives. Now, Psijic Order skills, you can use some of these if you want. You can use Borrowed Time. You can use Symbiosis. Symbiosis is really great in PvP. For healing. And then on to Undaunted. I don't use any of the assault skills. I use mostly support stuff, and I don't have all the support stuff unlocked, but if I do use some of these, I do use Purge. and I use Efficient Purge. I do use Siege Shield to some degree. I use Guard, and I use Revealing Flare. I do use all these, but it just depends. So, racials, make sure you get all your racial passives, and like I said, for the Argonian, they're great healers because of this. They do get 3% max magicka. They do get this potion passive that allows them to restore resources really well with potions, and on top of that, they do get the poison and disease resist. Along with immunity to poison and disease status effects. Moving on, alchemy, make sure you get medicinal use, and then provisioning, gourmand, and connoisseur. Now, going over the skills. Now, this is how I run my skills on my bar, and I find it to be the most effective. Starting off, we do have puncturing sweeps. This is our main damage output ability, because we can proc the Adric Spear passive, Burning Light, which does 4,266 magic damage to the enemies, and you have a 25% chance of proccing this off of your Puncturing Sweeps. Puncturing Sweeps does a lot of damage. It also reduces movement speed, and it heals you for 51% of the damage done when you use this ability. Next up, Total Dark. Total Dark is a very powerful skill. A lot of people don't realize how powerful this one skill can be. When you place this on an enemy, it will do 7,596 magic damage, and it heals you for 7,115 each time they use a direct damage attack. Now, there is another morph to this that does magic damage every time they do direct damage attack, but you're more of a healer type, so you want to be able to keep yourself survivable, but you also want to put some pressure on your enemies, and this is one of those skills that allow you to do that. It puts pressure on them, but it also keeps you alive. Next up, Ritual of Retribution. Probably the most effective cleanse you have as a Templar, and you will be using this quite a bit. It will remove 2 negative effects to you, and it heals you for 1,418 health every 2 seconds for 12 seconds, but it also does damage to people standing in it, and as you can see, it does 1,515 magic damage every 2 seconds for 12 seconds. So anyone who's standing within this circle, and it's a pretty big circle, as you can see, will be taking that damage, but you'll also be healing yourself. So, next up, we do have Radiant Glory. Radiant Glory, there's Radiant Oppression and Radiant Glory. Now, I like Radiant Glory because it heals you for 26% of the damage inflicted. This thing does do a lot of damage, but it does magic damage. And as you can see, all the abilities we have that do damage are magic damage abilities. Plus our Resto Staff, light and heavy attacks, are magic damage. But they aren't affected by either one of the things that boost our spell damage. So by 400 or 450. So we just get the 400 for these, and then when we get to the back bar, I'll show you the heals for the rest of the staff thing. Next up, Inner Light. We have this here for the increased max magic on Major Prophecy, and then our next skill. And you can use, there's other skills you can use besides this. I like using this, Replenishing Barrier. As you can see, this invokes a defensive tactic to protect yourself and nearby allies with wards that each absorbs up to 15,655 damage. This does get increased, though, when you buff up your spell damage. So this actually gets to about 18k when you're fully buffed up. The nice thing is that each time a ward dissolves, you restore 6 ultimate and gain 481 magicka per person. So I like to get in a big Zerg with this build to use this skill. But I very rarely do I use it anyways, so because it costs a lot. Next, onto the back bar. And as you can see, I only have 2 resto abilities, but if I'm playing, depending on how I play, I will drop Breath of Life to grab like Mutagen or Healing, Illustrious Healing to put in its place. But I never swap the other 2 skills out. So this skill here, Breath of Life, heals for a ton, and it heals another person too. So it's just a good overall heal. The next ability we have is Blessing of Restoration. Now, I know a lot of people say Combat Prayer is really good because it gives you the minor force, but in PvP, you're not concerned with that. Your people already do a ton of damage. So here, we're more concerned about survivability. So I like this one because it gives Minor Ward and Minor Resolve for 1320, which increases physical and spell by 1320 for 15 seconds. Really good at keeping your resistances up. The next skill we have is Ward Ally. Now, in this one, I love this because the Light Speakers actually boosts the shield strength to 3077. And also, on top of that, when we have our pots up, we actually boost it up even more. We can actually get this up to about 4K. So, and that's for just without any damage. But the more damage you take, the greater the shield strength. So I have gotten this shield in PvP up to about 9K, I think it was, or 10K, and I had like 20% health. So that's really powerful. And it does apply to you and one other person. So this is kind of a nice save tool. Next up, we have Channeled Focus. We have this here to give us the buff to our Major Ward, Major Resolve, increasing physical and spell resistance by 5,280. But it also recovers Magicka by 240 every second. So this just boosts our magic recovery to 2K. On top of that, if you stand in the circle, like at sieges, like if you're up on top of a keep, you're protecting a keep from a siege, you can actually stand in this, and this will keep you at that high resistance value. So you can sit there and do this, and you can keep your shields up as well. So, and that's what I like to do. I like to stand up on sieges, walls and stuff, and just light attack out. Next, I do have Inner Light again for the Max Magicka and the crit Major Prophecy. And then, last but not least, we do have Light's Champion. This is a very, 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 very powerful heal. As you can see, it heals for 11,639 every second, 1 second for 5 seconds. On top of that, you grant Major Force and Major Protection for 5 seconds, increasing critical damage by 15% and reducing damage taken by 30%. This is the other reason why I don't use Combat Prayer, is I use this. I use this like crazy. And it's only 120 ultimate. It doesn't take that long to build up. And that is the skills I use. Now moving on to CP. For CP, in the red tree, we have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces direct damage by 20%. This saves us those direct damage attack hits quite a bit, actually. Not as much as you would think, but it does help. Next, we have 10 into Spell Shield. This increases our spell resistance by 1,000. We have 40 into Resistance to increase our critical resist by 1,057. Moving on over here, we have 28 into Thick Skin. This reduces our damage taken from damage over time effects by 12%. We do have 10 into to Light Armor Focus. This increases our physical resistance by 1,000 while wearing 5 pieces of light armor. And then we have 43 into Hardy. This reduces our damage taken from physical, poison, disease damage by 10%. And then 43 into Elemental Defender. This reduces our Flame Frost, Shock, and Magic damage we take by 10%. Now, moving on over here. The reason I have 40 into Bastion, and I don't have anything Quick Recovery or Expert Defender, is because I do use a shield. I don't use the Light Armor shield. I use the Ward Ally shield. And it's a pretty weak shield, but it can be pretty strong. And so I want to boost it up as much as I can. It also gives us Filled Physician, which allows us to resurrect another player and reduce the damage you take by 15%. So this is really good because we do have a passive that allows us to res people at 25% faster. So, moving on, we have 37 into Siphoner. When you deal damage with a light or a heavy attack, you decrease the enemy's Magicka, Stamina Resource Restore, and Recovery by 9% for 3 seconds. You will be doing heavy attacks a lot, and this is going to allow you to keep that pressure on those enemies, especially when you're in a group. We have 40 into Warlord. This reduces our break free by 16%. We do have 23 into Sprinter, reducing our sprint cost by 14%. If you didn't know, one of the new passives to light armor with Murkmire is Grace, and this effectively reduces our snares by 4% for each piece of light armor worn. We get a 20% reduced snares, but we also reduce the our sprint costs by 3% for each piece. We get a 15%. So we actually almost have a 30% reduced sprint cost because of the way we have this set up right now, because of that right there. Moving on over here, we have 43 into Arcanus. This increases our magic recovery by 10%, and 43 into Tenacity. This increases our magicka and stamina of our fully charged heavy attacks. Heavy attacks on a resto staff, you get 30% resource return. This gives you a 40% plus the base of 30. So you actually go up to a 70% resource return on your heavy attacks. You get a lot back from your heavy attacks. Moving on, we have 56 into Tumbling. This reduces our dodge roll by 20. And because we have one piece, or we have the 3 well fitted, we actually get a 35%. But we actually go to 39 because of the 1 piece of medium armor. We have 28 in the Shadow Ward. This reduces our block cost by 12%. And this allows us just to block, and we do block quite often, so this just saves us a little bit of extra resources. Moving on to the Blue Tree. We have 43 into Bless. This increases our healing done by 10%. We have 40 into Elfborn. This increases our critical damage and critical healing by 16%. We have 43 into Elemental Expert. This increases our Flame Frost Shock and magic damage by 10%. And then we have 13 into Spell Erosion, just giving us a little bit of extra spell pin to bring our enemies down a little bit quicker. Now, moving on to the middle tree, we do have 35 into Staff Expert, because resto staffs, like I said, the more damage you can get out of your light and heavy attacks, the better off you are, and you're going to be doing a lot of heavy attacks with this, so this gives you a 20% increase in your heavy attacks and your light attacks. We do have 40 into Master at Arms. This improves your light attacks by 16%. And then over here we have 56 into Thaumaturge. This is going to increase our damage done with damage over time effects. Now, you guys are going to say, why do you have 56 points in here when you only have one ability that is boosted by damage over time, and that's our AoE, Ritual of Retribution? It isn't. Ritual of Retribution none of our abilities are affected by this. The main reason we put 56 points in here to give us that 20% is for our heavy attacks. If I were to take this out and lower this, or even remove this completely, our heavy attacks would do very little damage. With this here, we can actually get up to almost 6k heavy attacks. Like 6k per tick. So that's why we have this boosted up to 20%. Alright. Now that you guys have seen the build itself, and you guys have seen the skills, the CP, and that, I will tell you this. Later this week, I'm going to do a live play of this on the game, but I won't be using Earthgore. I will actually be using Sentinels, because I do like Sentinels, because I use that more than I use Earthgore. The only reason why I chose Earthgore is it's just got an insane heal, and that heal goes off every 35 seconds, so you're constantly getting it to proc. But I love using Sentinels while I'm in PvP, because I love to help out, like, stam people, especially if I'm in a siege and I'm up on a wall. I can, like, heal down below, and if I'm healing them and that Sentinel pops, it's going to give them health and it's going to give them stamina, so it really helps them out, the stam DPS who are out front fighting off people. So, but yeah, I will be showing some gameplay of this sometime, hopefully this week. I'm hoping. I don't have the full War Maidens yet, but I do have my light speaker gear, and I really want to get this build out there so you guys can see it played. It is a really good build. It's a really fun build. You have a really good crit, you have really good spell damage, like I said, about 3,500. Your max magic is not insane, but even if you were like a high elf, you would have like a 33k max magicka with a 25k health. And because you want about a 25k health to make this build good and be survivable. Anything below that, you're really hurting yourself. So, But yeah, the build itself is really fun to play. It's amazing at its like ability to keep people alive, its utility for group support, that kind of stuff. It's just crazy. But that's it for the War Priest, guys. I hope you guys like it. If you do, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me or other things by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.